Here we go. Okay, right. Actually, this is a bit of one of Gary's flat roads sort of starts, because I didn't know who I was going to make the video to Gary or to Professor Anton. I think it's to Professor Anton, but I haven't really spoken to him for 5 years, and that was only very briefly. How to do this? About 5 years ago as well, actually it was probably 6, when one of my early YouTube free will videos, somebody from England typed in a comment which was, forget exactly how it went obviously, but it was along the lines of, I think you'll find, Nick, that you're wrong about this free will thing, because the entire legal system of England is based on free will actually existing. And I remember, it's one of those photographic memory type things. I remember sitting here, kind of looking at my keyboard and looking at the comment and thinking, what on earth can I write to that? But from Gary's last video to Professor Anton, I sensed a very, very similar thing. And this time it was hard determinism was the one possibility. And the other possibility for Professor Anton was giving up the idea that quite a lot probably, of the words that he or you think you understand, you don't understand, or at least the words that have made sense to you, and when you've communicated with other people have made sense in the past, if you accept hard determinism, don't make sense anymore. And the reaction's the same for me. It's kind of as the English man and his law, as in yeah, as in it's not because it's shocking and horrible for you doesn't make it wrong. That isn't as Gary would say, that's not a good argument. But I can see why it would make you reject it, because you are to a greater extent the words that you use. Your words are to a great extent you, and you're not going to be giving them up for anything, especially not something that can be easily rejected, because so many other people reject the idea of hard determinism, because you and the way you use the words are kind of the 99%, and you and the way the people that you interact with say that you have free will, you're the 99% there. You're so comfortable in the majority with your belief in free will and your belief that the words that you use make sense, that I can totally accept that it would be ridiculous for you to give them up for something as useless as hard determinism. Okay, what I wanted to talk about though was, and this is more directly to Professor Anton, free will. I mean, I tried with you about 5 years ago, but I could see I wasn't getting anywhere at all. And I think I watched quite a lot of the interactions between you and Gary, and you have tentatively moved closer towards at least understanding what people are talking about when they say, listen, Guy, you do not have free will. Which I think is a rotten way of explaining it, just telling somebody you do not have free will. Because I have my own ways of explaining things. But okay, let's start. I'll just go through your life and hopefully try and explain to you more about this free will thing. And I have no delusions at all that at the end of it you will go, I understand now. I know what will happen. The complications of your mind will throw up more complications and you won't see what I'm talking about at all. But I have seen that you've listened to a lot of stuff in the past, so I'm going to have my go now. Now, for talking about things, and it's always actually a problem, especially when we're talking about cause and effect, to carve through the history of life and start somewhere. But I've thought about this beforehand, and I'm going to do it with your life, and I'm going to do it involving mummy Professor Anton and daddy Professor Anton, and the joining of daddy sperm and mummy egg. Okay, so now we have proto Professor Anton. So we're kind of really slowed down at this 2-cell stage. Now, you and I, we know the biology reasonably, but not like good biologists, but we know that it reasonably enough to say that we've got 2 cells on the go now. We've got the mummy cell and the daddy cell, and they're getting it together. And from the 2 cells, there will be 4 cells. Okay, so what will project out into the future will be, and this is a different way I thought of doing it, those 2 cells getting together on a particular, what we call time, date, whatever, and you listening to this video, nothing really has changed, as in no pixie dust has been added to the situation. Now, you know that, but there's all confusion about that. You won't accept that, and you'll try and interject or inject some other sort of pixie dust, or come up with explanations like sum being greater than the parts, etc., etc. You will pervert this somewhere along the line. But what we have in life, all life in the universe, as you call it, are the interactions of things. What often happens is when you get a complicated clump of things and something interacts with it, it just so happens that you can get an awful lot of complicated interaction from that interaction. If something is well complicated, it could, Gary just did in this video, the facets of a diamond. Light photons can come into it and bang around in so many different ways before it pings off in a certain direction. Though the way the diamond was constructed, simply but complicatedly, can lead to extremely complicated interreactions with something like a photon. All along the life of Professor Anton, this is all we're going to bump into. The 2 cells and its environment. The 2 cells are complicated enough in the way that they're constructed that they will interact with its environment in a certain way that soon there will be 4 cells. That's complicated enough that it'll interact in a certain way. There'll be 8 cells, 16, 32, etc., etc. Months go on. You've got what is a Professor Anton heart, little heart beating and whatever, and before we know it, Professor Anton pops out, day of birth. Of interest there? No real interest at all, is there really? Nothing much has changed. There's no pixie dust on that particular day. We've got cutting the umbilical cord. We could say now the Professor Anton thing is going around on its own. It's a complicated enough bit of machinery. I'm using machinery. I know it doesn't sound nice, but it's probably the best description. Bit of machinery that can go around on its own. Okay, is that significant? Has anything really significant happened? Has Professor Anton ever been injected into this thing? No, we must accept no. The Professor Anton machine thing does crawling, goo-gooing, says its first word, whatever it might be, and we can do a big jump now, and we can take this Professor Anton thing all the way to passing its professor exam. Has anything ever been injected into this thing that is different than just anything else that we find in the universe, as in complications of molecular arrangements? No. What we have is a hugely complicated molecular arrangement that, when things interact with it, extremely strange and wondrous things happen. An airplane is a complicated arrangement. When what we call humans, these complicated arrangements, interact with an airplane, strange and wondrous things happen. But there in no way, at no time, and this is the most important thing, at no time has ever there been an injection of anything else. There's no elseness ever. All we have is a complicated molecular arrangement, a structure, ever changing, interacting with the external universe, which is, in its own way, it is only a complicated molecular arrangement. And if we want to push it, we can say that really the Anton complicated molecular arrangement is just part of the universe complicated molecular arrangement. But one thing we do as humans is, as Gary keeps saying, and this is where it gets complicated, we section things off. We say that that is a Professor Anton, this is a mystic, and you've got a Mrs. Anton there. It's a pretty arbitrary divide, but it's a useful divide. Now you can say, well, something must be doing this clever dividing, and it's the complication, the molecular complications here, which is doing the dividing and doing the talking and doing what we call thinking. And there are things about talking and thinking and consciousness and memory that we don't know how to carve up and section and put into places. And what does that mean? Again, it's a bit Gary-like. The information is not there. We are ignorant of it. We can say that this is a piece of card, but we can't say memory is this. That is not it's not a computation of the molecular complication yet. When something isn't a part of the molecular system yet, it's just unknown. But as soon as it's known, like I could tell you a new word, that then just becomes, there's nothing mysterious. It becomes physically, you become physically, and that's you, that's what I'm carved off as you, become physically a different molecular composition. And because of knowing this word, you could say on one side, or exactly the same but a different description, is you are now a different molecular structure. Things, when it interacts with you, will happen differently. Or the way it would be explained is, now you understand this word, you can say what this word means to somebody else. But all we ever do from the first sperm getting together with an egg is become different parts of the universe, becoming a different complicated or composite molecular structure, which is ever changing and ever doing different and more complicated things. It's not always that highly complicated clumps of molecular structure cause other things that interact with it to do very complicated things. But as humans, generally it happens that we can, as complicated molecular clumps, do what to other things seem to be complicated interactions. Complicated things happen around humans because we are so complicated. In a couple of billion years ago, when we were simpler clumps, simpler things happened around us, except for the weather, which, either has or hasn't changed much, but that had its degrees of complications due to its molecular construction. But again, and I'll just finish here, but it's just to always understand, Professor, that from the sperm and egg getting together and to you watching this YouTube video, nothing has ever been added that is a special Professor Anton that can then resist the ongoing rush of history and the whirling universe. There is nothing. Professor Anton always is and always will be just a part of the whirling universe. Nothing has ever arisen that is certainly not strong enough to resist the universe in its ongoing billions of years of motion of various molecules. But that doesn't even come into it, because there is nothing that has ever been added that could possibly become resistant to the flow of nature, the flow of time, the flow of the universe. The flow of the universe is what is. Nothing, absolutely nothing, from the 2 cells up to the trillions of cells that we call you, has ever been added to that can in any way resist what is the universe. You are only ever part of the universe as an ever-changing molecular clump or clumping. And because you're such a complicated clumping, things around you happen in complicated ways. So I'll leave it there. Thanks for listening. Bye.